early action, does it even matter? I know this is something of a mystery for so many students. I'm going to talk about early action, where it matters and where it doesn't. Of the top 50 schools, only 14 of those schools have historically had early action programs that are non-binding. That's what we're going to focus on in this video. Before we get too deep into that though, I want to just quickly say restrictive early action and single choice early action, we actually covered in a more recent video that was also on early decision, and we have data points that we could find on those in that video. So here we're going to focus on the 14 schools that have historically had early action programs. We're also going to potentially talk about the 5 of those schools that actually have data, which is exciting because we can kind of parse through. Now there's also some mixed messages in here, so I'm going to break it down for you guys. Let's start at the top of the list with MIT. And what we find is if we look at the 2021 to 2022 data sets, our EA acceptance rate is at 4.72%. Our regular decision admit rate is at 2.25%, and the EA to regular decision advantage is 2.1. I'm going to say early action to MIT is going to give you a slight advantage at that campus. But I will also say that on MIT's admission website, MIT's admissions people state that there is literally no advantage to applying early. They say that we consider applications the same, whether you've applied early or whether you apply regular. Now, within this idea that it is still double the admission rate, is that essentially MIT is such a competitive school that if people choose to apply early action, chances are MIT is their first choice school and they have a chance at MIT, and they're not throwing away an early decision chance at a place like Cornell or NYU to try to get into MIT because they think they actually might have a shot. So that being said, we might see a stronger candidate pool early, and that might be what's explaining this 2x kind of phenomenon. My general rule of thumb as a consultant is that any admissions rate that's ED over RD sort of factor of double or more, if you get above that double, you definitely are getting into actual real advantage. Let's go to UChicago. Okay, UChicago notoriously does not fully release data. They don't believe in a common data set. They hide everything, except they don't hide their yield rate. Their yield rate is about 80%. What does that mean? That means 80% of the students who get into their school end up coming. Now, here's what's weird about UChicago having such a high yield rate. Stanford and Harvard's yield rates are around 82%, depending on the year. That's like the same, you guys. Princeton Review did a survey a while back for your top 10 dream schools. UChicago didn't even crack the top 10, which to me tells the story that applying early decision or early action really matters at UChicago. I've also heard rumors and estimates that they are bringing in around 80% of their class as people who applied early. So I always say apply early at UChicago, even just early action. If that's all you can get, it's going to confer some potential advantage. Tulane is a little bit harder to tease out. They've released some data, but not all data. And here's what we know. Under 3% of the students admitted to Tulane applied regular decision. 3% of those admitted. 97% of the students admitted at Tulane applied early action or early decision. So that means that the largest percent of admitted students at Tulane came in through early action. The admission rate is likely higher with early decision. Only 106 students got in regular decision compared to 2,249 getting in early action. So it's really important if you're applying to Tulane to make sure that at least you apply early action, if not early decision. UVA admits that only 29% of its total class came in through a regular decision plan. The early action admit rate, according to UVA, is 20.14%, and the regular admit rate is 12.9%. That means that 71% of students at UVA either applied early action or early decision. That's a whole lot of students, people. Probably some advantage there. If we go down the list, UNC Chapel Hill doesn't release data. UT Austin, University of Wisconsin-Madison, University of Illinois, Case Western. None of those are releasing any data. We have to get all the way down to Georgia Tech to find data again. 25.5% of students are getting in at early action, while only 16.42% of students are getting in regular. That's a 1.6 advantage. Now, the early action deadline, I think, has passed for Georgia Tech at this point, But if you're a younger student and you can take advantage of it, I definitely recommend that you should. Early Action 2, which is for out-of-state students, has a much lower acceptance rate of 12%, which is actually even lower than the regular admit rate at Georgia Tech, which is 16.42%, but take this into consideration. Georgia Tech fills a lot of its class with in-state students, so I would still say that Early Action 2 is probably going to put you at an advantage. The overall Early Action versus regular rate is about 1.6, and both pools are going to have people from in-state. So I think I would still recommend, if you have it in you, to apply early. It's not going to hurt you there. Now I'm going to talk about where we don't really know whether early action matters or not, but in most cases I would argue it's not going to hurt you. The following schools don't have any data released, so we don't know 100% what the story is there. University of Michigan, UNC Chapel Hill, UT Austin, University of Wisconsin-Madison, University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana and Case Western University, and Ohio State University do not release data on early action admission rates. But I would argue, for the most part, given all of this data that we have, given what we know about the schools that do release data, at the majority of schools, early action is an advantage. And even at the schools where our early action rates and our regular decision rates are about the same, there's not that much of a disadvantage, so to speak. Also, oftentimes, if you're rejected early action, you're not straight out rejected, you're deferred to the regular admission round. So it's unlikely that applying early action is going to hurt you unless you have really low scores, or maybe there's a couple of universities where it really doesn't matter if you apply early action. I'm going to get to those in a minute. But at those schools, I usually would say go ahead and apply early action if you can, because it's likely to confer an advantage, but we statistically can't verify that historically. Okay, now we're going to talk about the two schools where it doesn't really matter if you early action according to data. The first on my list is Georgetown. Georgetown's early action admission rate is actually lower than its regular admission rate. Its early action admission rate is 9.98%. Its regular admission rate is 13.16%. That's actually a 20% disadvantage for applying early. So as I like to say, it doesn't really matter if you apply early action to Georgetown or not. Now, I wouldn't say that applying early action to Georgetown would actually hurt you, because chances are if you're applying early action to Georgetown, you don't think you're going to get into Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, or Yale, because Georgetown's early action is somewhat restrictive. You cannot apply to Georgetown early action and ED, which is different from some early action programs. Many early action programs will allow you to apply to the early action program if you apply ED somewhere else. Georgetown is not one of them. So if you're EDing anywhere or you're applying to HIPS, you're not going to EA to Georgetown. Thus, I would argue that Georgetown's pool probably gets a little bit stronger in the regular decision round, and that's what would account for this particular anomaly. But in any case, I think statistically, it's safe to say that if you really want to go to Georgetown and you feel like you're a really strong candidate and you have a shot as some other school that might have more prestige or more difficult admissions protocols, you can go ahead and try to see what you can do. The second school on my list where it doesn't really matter with early action is the University of Georgia. Its early admission rate and regular admission rates are about the same, 41.4 and 42.5. It's about the same, you guys. There's not a lot of difference. So University of Georgia, it doesn't seem like early action is conferring that much of an advantage. Now, that being said, there are advantages even at these two schools to applying early action. The number one advantage is that you get to find out early. And if you know that these schools are the number one school on your list, there's nothing stopping you from applying early action. It's totally fine. But I would say at those two particular schools, it doesn't matter that much whether you apply early action or not, at least not compared to kind of a lot of the other options that you have out there. So there you go. From all that data, what do I make of this? Well, my first conclusion is that I'm pretty sure that applying early action is not going to hurt you. And from the data that we have, it does appear that it could help you. Now, there is quite a bit of story to unpack in terms of what these statistics mean. Is it really twice the chance of getting into MIT if you apply EA? Shoulder shrug, I'm not 100% sure. But like I said, at super competitive universities, if you don't have a really unique quality, if you look like a lot of other candidates, they're going to be filling their class. And once particular kinds of people fill that class, they're going to be looking for diversity typically down the line. If you're not that diversity, well, it's going to be harder to get in regular. I hope you guys like this video, so please give it a thumbs up. If you want to know more about early decision and that advantage, we have a whole other video on that I hope you guys will check out. If you're a junior or senior and you're still working on your test score and you want to score as awesome as you are, be sure to check out SupertutorTV.com, where we have video-based prep courses for both the SAT and the ACT. I've helped personally coach students to perfect scores on both exams. We have people even score perfectly using our ACT course online, so definitely check that out as an option for prep. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your applications, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.